Good morning and good afternoon to everybody who's watching us here today. Uh, some of our panelists are missing because they have I'm trying to see how to. Yeah, that's
I
there.
like that one.
Yeah, I was trying to. So, good morning to people who are here with us today. So, I have Jawanda with me. I know we're running a few minutes late. I'm sorry for that we have half of the quarter of it, half of the panel. They might join, they might not join. Some are unwell, some are okay, but just running late. So, I'm gonna go ahead and those who don't know Jawanda and Ashley, I'm gonna let them introduce themselves.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jawanda Newsom. Everyone calls me Jay. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a BCBA, a Board Certified Behavior Analyst here in San Antonio. I own an ABA therapy company. We service children from when they're first diagnosed. The youngest we've had probably about 2 years old, all the way to teens. And then we have a second side of the clinic where we go out to see adults. Our state has contracted with nursing homes to house individuals with different IDD disorders, and the nursing homes are not quite equipped to deal with some of the unwanted behaviors. So we go in and provide the behavior supports. So that's me in a
Okay.
nutshell.
Thanks.
Hi,
Ashley?
everyone. I'm Ashley Knuckle, also a BCBA. I live in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm also a student, a PhD student at Chicago School. I've been working with kids with autism for about 8 years now. I specialize in school-based interventions and culturally adapted treatments. So thank you, Ruth, for inviting us.
Yes.
Yeah, today is going to be a very interesting day and very interesting topic. So we're going to go ahead and with the question, and our topic today is cultural disparities and behavior strategies in ASD. And I'm going to go with um, the first question, which I'm going to ask Jawanda. What disparities do providers, professionals have when dealing with cultural service or cultural services? You
Um,
can discuss on any of the points that you think of.
right. So when you say providers, I'm thinking, what do I have trouble with as a provider?
Yes.
And I'm going to say, living here in the United States and being African American, I didn't have mentorship, you know. And what I mean by that, yes, I did have a BCBA that supervised me. And I became a BCBA a long, long time ago. I had to actually drive to Austin to get my supervision because there was no one here in San Antonio. But there was no one like me in the field that I had access to. And so that played a role on me. I guess I was expected to have the same knowledge base and everything as all my other counterparts, and I did not. Truthfully, I did not. I can admit that, and so that was tough. And I would have loved to have someone that looked like me for a mentor, not necessarily just as a supervisor, but a mentor to come up in this field. And even now, today, thankfully, we have the BABA group. I think it's called BIBA now, but there's still not enough of us represented in the field. So as a provider, I feel like that's the most limiting thing. What about you, Ashley? There's nothing for you as a provider, is there? Do you think?
There must be a lot.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting myself unmuted.
Oh, okay.
So when I was like thinking about that question, Ruth, I was thinking about it more of like the disparities that folks from diverse cultural backgrounds experience in accessing services.
Mm.
Is that, are you, can I
Yeah.
address that? Yeah,
Mhm.
so abroad, so ABA is really central in the United States and Canada. So when you take ABA out of that context and you're trying to work in other countries or other cultural contexts, there are very few trained professionals. So we struggle because there aren't enough BCBA supervisors, and there are way too many clients for the amount of certified practitioners available. Additionally, because there are so few of us, there are so many places around the world that in terms of transportation and location of the analysts, you can't access them. So we really need to increase the number of practitioners within each country so that we can be more accessible in places maybe outside of the cities. Like I'm in Nairobi, and I keep getting referrals for folks who are in maybe Eldoret, and that's really far. It's like a 6-hour drive, so I can't be accepting clients that are so far away. Additionally, when we think about language and literacy, most of our interventions where the evidence base, the research that's available is written in English for the most part. And so folks who want to access that are going to need to be able to be fluent in speaking English. So that might create some barriers. And the majority of practitioners are coming from the US. So for instance, me, I'm here in Kenya, but I can't speak fluent Swahili, let alone the other, how many languages are there, Ruth? Like over 40 languages spoken in Kenya. And so if I am working with a family who doesn't speak English as their first language or wants services in a local language, that would be something that I would struggle with. So I would need to really be training folks to work underneath me as behavior technicians who are more fluent in that language or culture. And then additionally, resource and financial barriers, that's a major issue when you're trying to implement ABA outside of somewhere like the US where we have wide insurance coverage. So here in Kenya, there are very few folks who can access insurance that will cover ABA services. And services, it's different than other therapies where you take speech and that's 1 hour a week maybe, or OT 1 hour a week. But with ABA, especially early intervention, we're recommending anywhere from 20 to 40 hours a week of services. And if that's not covered by insurance, then that creates a major disparity. So those are my...
Yes, I want to piggyback off of you, Ashley. I do know that a lot of people think the U.S., most people have access to services, and I would like to say that's a myth as well, because if you have money, you do. So you talk about like socioeconomic status and things. So you have to have a job that has insurance that may possibly cover, or you may need to be able to afford to buy an insurance policy for your child to be able to have autism coverage. But here in Texas, we just became an autism mandated state maybe a year ago, and Medicaid still does not cover ABA therapy here in Texas where I live. So those children that are not necessarily wealthy or middle class, they still do not have access to ABA therapy. And so that's still an issue that somehow we need to address, even here in the United States. And not just ABA therapy. ABA therapy is not the end all. I mean, some of these children do not have access to speech, because if you're in a poverty line, like you said, how do I get the transportation to take them every week? Or, how do I go to an OT appointment as well if those services do not come to my home, So there's just a lot of issues, even here in the United States.
And when we're thinking about African folks within the diaspora in the United States, like Ruth, even if they are able to access services through insurance, like in Florida, that is an autism mandated state and that's the only state that I personally have worked in providing ABA services. And I was Medicaid credentialed. So I was working with lots of people who were covered by Medicaid, which was awesome. But even if you are able to access the services, they're not necessarily culturally appropriate, because we don't receive any kind of training on culturally responsive practice, or how to adapt our interventions, or how to train and work with families from different cultural contexts than our own. And so that I would say is another barrier as well. Hi, Melody.
Hi, Melody.
Hi.
Thank you for joining in. You can introduce yourself. We are discussing number 1, so you can just jump right in.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Melody. I'm a BCBA here in UAE, but I'm also American, and also from Florida. So I've also worked in Florida, like Ashley, and then in the States, I've also worked in Georgia and Louisiana as well. Um, yeah, and so now I'm here, very interested in international dissemination, um, promoting culturally competent services, culturally competent, training people as well to be culturally competent to provide services for their areas.
So, Melody, where you are we talking about the cultural disparities in a whole lot of big ball knowledge, language? What have you experienced?
So definitely, I agree with everything that both I heard the last little bit of what Jawanda said, and then I definitely agree with what Ashley said. Is um, in ABA training, you don't get training to be culturally competent, and it's extremely important because if you're not even taking that into consideration, even if what you're learning and wanting to teach could be evidence based and could have all of this great research behind it, but it could be completely ineffective if the people that you're providing these services to, if those services are not adapted to fit their needs. So my biggest thing is I also think it's important for practitioners, number one, to seek out the knowledge that they're not getting from their coursework or even in their immediate environment. You don't just want to walk into a situation where you're not able to be an effective service provider and it's due to your own lack of knowledge that you could have went and even if you need to talk to others, make sure you're talking to the families, seeing what's important to them, um, because you may not even be aware like what's important in one culture is not important in other cultures, and that's just across all contexts really. Like that's probably the most important thing out of everything. So it's really a shame that it's not emphasized because you're not going to get anywhere if that it's a huge barrier to be able
So,
to have any sort of progress at all.
so
Agree.
basically, it's like also bilingual and bicultural barriers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. But when we talk about those things, I feel like we don't get specific enough. Like we talk about cultural competency, but what are we talking about? What does that mean in ABA? And I can tell you when I go into homes, it's things like when I start working on adaptive skills. Let's say I have an Indian or a Bangladesh family, they're not concerned about their child eating because most of the time they feed them and they don't use the utensils for a long a long while, so those things are not important, and those are some of the things that are on our assessment. It's just not that important. They co-sleep, so sleeping alone or sleeping through the night is really not that important. It's okay in their culture for them to wake up in the middle of the night, be with the child, feed them, things like that, and put them back to bed. So you have to be really careful when you start picking those goals and using our assessments, um, that I think are really geared toward Western civilizations. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, do you guys have anything else that you would pick out that we need to be
Yeah.
with?
I think I definitely agree with what Jawanda is saying about like different practices, sleep patterns, eating habits, even things like grooming, how you might brush your hair in one culture versus another culture. Like those are all really, really obvious things, but then there are things that are not as obvious, like language, the way that parents and children communicate to each other, or the way that siblings interact with each other. So how we might teach social skills in our Western context would not be appropriate at all, And that's one of those things where the cultural part of it is the most important part, especially when it comes to social skills, because you're not even going to be able to teach social skills if you're teaching it from a different social context that doesn't even apply to those individuals. So taking the time to learn, like, communication habits, what types of words are being used, how do we express ourselves in this culture, is the only way that you'll be able to potentially learn. And you still, even then, it might even be better for you to seek someone else who is a part of that culture and work with them to teach those skills instead.
So Ashley, go ahead.
Even in terms of training, like I've been working with a couple of clients where the grandmother is really, really involved, lives with the family, and she needs to be incorporated in all of our parent trainings. We're doing grandparent training as well. So I think that differs by culture as well, who's going to be the really important stakeholders.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you something along that line, like in the culture where you are. Because when I went to Kenya last year, I just heard so many stories. So how do you talk to those parents who still doesn't recognize autism as, it's not, there's no physical characteristics of it, right? So how do you convince them that, I guess, what's the question I'm trying to ask? I'm trying to be sensitive as well, but that nothing's wrong with the child. We just need to support them in helping them reach, some goals of like language, communication, social, but nothing's wrong. You know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying?
I think, like, in terms of the autism diagnosis, most of the clients that I'm working with or the families that I've interacted with, they've already received this diagnosis and had these conversations more with like the developmental pediatricians before they get referred to me. So by the time they get to the ABA assessment process, they're really just looking for answers. They want to be empowered and know how can we help my child? How can they help their children progress? So I think, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had interactions both here and in Ghana with folks who don't believe in autism, who think that maybe autism is caused by some kind of spiritual phenomena or something along those lines. And that definitely exists here in Kenya as well. But I think that for the most part, the parents that I've interacted with and the clients I'm working with, they've accepted the diagnosis.
Okay, that sounds great. And you, Melody, do you see that? Like, parents are accepting. So I guess here in the United States, sometimes we get our clients before they're even diagnosed. They come to us seeking help. We're not the diagnosticians, but we guide them through the process. So I'm guessing, Melody, how about you? Are they diagnosed before they come to you?
Sometimes. I've had similar experiences to you, though, here too. And we know about how there's stigmas and things like that. I think that especially in other parts of the world that don't have as many behavior analysts and don't have as much awareness about autism, then you do see a lot more of situations where you come into I think you're more likely maybe to come into contact with families who have a lot more questions and a lot more concerns because they haven't anywhere really. I don't think that that's unique to one place, but I have seen it here. In the UAE, I do think that things have gotten really, in terms of awareness, really good here in that sense. So I've been here for 4 years now, and I think that there's a really good sense of awareness here, which is great. And I think because we're so close to Africa, it would be great if that could be expanded in terms of knowledge. Hopefully, I'm here and I've been to Kenya, and so I look forward to going to more places in Africa to hopefully help with that. But yeah, I think going back to the culture part, culture is huge for that. Like knowing how to communicate. I mean, it's a really anytime you're getting news of some sort, it could be about anything that you weren't expecting to receive, or if you had an idea about how you were going to go about certain things, and now you're just finding out about this autism diagnosis potentially, that can be really impactful. And I think as a provider, knowing how to come into that situation with the correct and nobody can be perfect, but at least taking those steps to seek the knowledge that you need about the population is key. I mean, those are crucial moments in developing a relationship with a therapeutic relationship with the people that you're going to work with. So I'm glad that this conversation is happening now. It should have been happening a lot earlier, but yeah, the more we talk about it, the better it gets. Like nobody can be the know-it-all for I know everything about Kenyans because I worked with one Kenyan family or because I visited Kenya. The point is that you continuously be willing to learn things, and that you don't be so quick to consider yourself an expert just because you've had a few experiences or just because you know a few things about the culture. And no matter who you're working with, that's the way that you should always be approaching how you're going to be delivering services.
Agree. So my question to you, ladies, since y'all are all BCBAs, do you know of any courses or resources that we can share for training, professional training? It's empty, right?
I recently worked on a book chapter with one of my mentors for that new book that's being released, Multicultural Practice in ABA. What's the book? I don't even know the name of the title, but it's just was released. And so there are multiple chapters in that book about various cultures. And I know that one of the editors is going to be trying to make some trainings with the authors of the chapters that would be specific about whatever culture that chapter was about. So the one that I worked on with my mentor was on culturally appropriate treatments for Asian American clients and families. So our PowerPoint and presentation will be focused around adapting ABA for those populations.
Okay.
So that's something up and coming that I know of, but other than that,
no.
we really need help in that area.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's good if we can get, like, even if the way we are talking about the cultural and bilingual, difference barriers, if we could get somebody to either at least translate a little bit by bit, of what autism and these strategies, like not a whole book, but just like small leaflets or pamphlets or booklets that they can distribute to places where they don't speak English, and I think it would be a good idea. But I'll just go ahead and ask each one of you, as what would you do to reduce disparities in a community?
So
through caregivers, through care, what would you implement where you are here?
Okay, so for me, because I own an ABA therapy company, it's important for me to grab a client or two per like what we call semesters, I guess, like 3 months to 6 months of a child, and give scholarships so that they get access to some therapy, and give free parent training workshops, because that can go a long way, the parent training workshops. And we try our best to get them signed up for every program that we can think of. We just try to bring awareness. We go to all kinds of events, but really it's very difficult as a provider to close that gap. I mean, that's all I know to do, but I'm willing to learn anything, if there's anything else out there that I can do.
Ashley, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I think that training caregivers and empowering parents is really key to effective dissemination, especially in Kenya where I'm working. And so one of my other mentors, Dr. Jane, her and I have been working on a project, or working on a course, the EDS Learning ABA Technician course, which is like specifically designed as a basic ABA training for parents and caregivers. And so we are meeting live with our students once a week to discuss the different strategies and the modules, but we are able to break it down and really do it in a culturally responsive manner with culturally responsive examples. And these are, our students are mostly all across Africa. We haven't had any students from outside of Africa yet. But they all bring in their own unique experiences and their own unique cultures from wherever they are coming from. And it's really cool to be able to break that down. I think that that is a really great way to really disseminate culturally responsive ABA practice. Additionally, I think we really need to figure out some way to get a master's level training program on the continent, because until that happens, we're not going to have people from here being trained to be independent BCBA or behavior analyst practitioners. And there are hardly any BCBAs here now, which means that there are very few people who are available to supervise. So that's just a huge gap, and we really need to target getting that verified course sequence on the continent. I really believe that Kenyans are the best people to be providing ABA services in Kenya. Ghanaians are the best people to be providing ABA services in Ghana. And so I see my primary role is to train people here, not necessarily to work as a clinician or to be directly providing ABA services, because no matter what I do, I'm not going to be fully competent in the culture ever. And so I think that's the best way anyway. How about you, Melody?
I really don't have much to add to that, you guys. I agree 100%. I will say this. I do feel like we just live in a society that is very capitalistic in nature. So the idea of wanting to get trainings and certifications, especially here in UAE, I see that a lot. And then whatever it is that you're going to go get, it just makes me qualified. So I like what you're saying, Ashley, because I feel like you have to be careful about just recommending something and take into consideration the impact that can have on the people that you're recommending that to. So, and what I would recommend to one family might not be the same that I would, in a place where we're already lacking services, I want to focus more on the training piece versus what can I recommend, because there's going to be flaws in the cultural relevancy. There's going to be flaws in maybe the way that it's understood. And those are, if you don't take all of those things into consideration, then what you're recommending might not be helpful at all. So why not focus on, let me help this community, develop what works for them. I'll provide suggestions, but really they're the ones to develop it. Yeah.
Snaps.
Ashley, question for you. What can we do though here? So, like when I went to Kenya, into Nairobi, and I'm not just speaking just Nairobi, I know that's where you are, but, and Ruth, maybe you can help too. Like, what can we do as someone who are established BCBAs? How can we help continents like Africa become more aware of autism, ABA therapy, and all other therapies? ABA is not the end all, but like just autism treatment, period. Like, what can we do? You're on mute, Ruth.
Ruth, we can't hear you.
Sorry, there's too much noise behind here. So for me, personally, or the way I've seen things, trainings. A lot of, if we can empower parents with trainings, we can go a very, very long way, because we can't have a lot of professionals. You know, we can't cover a whole country. It's big. So even when we are doing training, like for caregivers and the behavior technicians, that the trainings like that, it really helps, because it's like a domino effect. Not like now we have so many languages in Kenya. Some people don't understand English, even if it's those ones who are all the way, you know, our grandparents, even if it's a national language. But you see, we have to have that. You can speak this. If a caregiver from a remote area is taught on how to handle a child in the society or in a community, then they all benefit, you know. So for me, training, and maybe materials, because we lack a lot of materials. You see, we don't have that. You know, we are always like trying the best we can, and it's like a lot of people who are going through with kids with disability, they don't come from very, I don't know, it's like the economic status of majority is not even up there. So you'll see a lot of them struggling. So trainings and materials, and, you know, those are that's for me, that is most important. You know, if I can get training, I know I'll train some other parent. You know, I can know. It's so hard when it's an e-learning, because not everybody can afford the data to watch you guys talk about this, or to sit down for. They are so busy trying to fend for their children. They're too busy to even think, what are they talking about? You know, so sometimes when you train a few and they can attend and see it physically, they can implement it. But just saying, oh, we're gonna do an e-learning, it's even impossible to some of the parents in the up country, because internet, they don't have internet, you know. So for them, that is just, you know, it's a luxury. You know, it's not like here. And then it's not like the way here we pay a monthly phone, while there you pay as you go. You know, if you put $10, if it's done, you have to add. It's not like $10 for a whole month, you know. So it's kind of constant. We have also to look at how, you know, how we live, what's affordable, how can we assess training, how can we, all these things. So if all of like, let's say this panel decide, okay, we're going to write what is autism in English and everything, then I will need somebody also in Swahili to write, you know, try and follow up. We'll need somebody in French to write a chapter of what is autism, just a booklet. And we share it like online, like here, they can print it out. That's where I would do. And that's what I'm trying to figure it out, how to do this, you know. So I don't know if it's doable to you guys.
Yeah. Ruth, I completely agree with you that training is really essential. But I definitely have witnessed a lot of trainings happening, whether they're on the ground here or or e-learning or what have you that are not sustainable because the culture hasn't been taken into context. Like people aren't applying the cultural variables that influence training efficacy into their models of training. And so I really think that in terms of being in the US or being away and trying to come up with something that's sustainable, that's going to actually have an impact in somewhere like Kenya, we really need research. So when I was in the US as a master's student, my goal was always to move back to Ghana. That was my plan. That's why I got into this field. But while I was in the US, what could I do to make an impact there? There was very little that I could do. And in terms of even when I would go in the summers and do trainings, how sustainable were those trainings actually? Like when I would go the following summer, were the caregivers actually implementing the strategies that I trained them on the year before? Absolutely not. And that's because I wasn't culturally adapting my training procedures. And so I started doing research on cultural adaptation. And I think that that's something US practitioners really need to work hard on, is developing more of an evidence base, and maybe writing grants, trying to find funding for this research is essential as well. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna read what the answer for Miriam, because she can't attend. She still has a problem with her car or something. With proper education and training, professionals of any cultural background can develop the necessary skills to treat and interact with consumers who come from outside their culture. For example, teachers can be educated in cultural competency by focusing on developing personal and interpersonal awareness and sensitivities, acquiring different bodies of cultural knowledge, and mastering a set of skills for effective communication and teaching. In addition to focusing on educating ABA professionals, in general, another way to strengthen cultural competence in the field is to increase the number of culturally diverse professionals. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think everybody's on mute. Ashley, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think that the best way to ensure that we are having sustainable and culturally effective practices across cultures across the world is to make sure that we have local trained professionals who are actually from these countries, from these cultures, who are on the ground able to implement the services. Yeah. I 100% agree with Miriam.
Yes, and I agree with Ashley. But again, my question always goes back to, how do we get that though? Like, what can we do to get those professionals there? You know, what can I do as a person to help find a solution to that?
I personally know of multiple people here who their only barrier to becoming a BCBA is finance. Like if they had a scholarship to pay for an online master's program in ABA, then they would do that. And I've already agreed, like I will supervise anyone here in Kenya for free if they are going towards their BCBA certification, so that they're, even though the BCBA certification won't necessarily mean much in a few years, it still would give them the training that they need to work as independent practitioners, where they're not going to need supervision from someone like you and I.
Right. That's good. That's what you said. It's great. It's something that I can think about. How do we set up like these scholarship foundations? How do we reach out to universities and figure out, can we get some reduced, tuition if we pay it up front for certain individuals? Those are some good thoughts that I'm going to be thinking about myself.
And I totally agree with Ashley. Like, financial is a big problem. they are people in organizations, that autism organizations, they want to like up their game. They want to get some studies. But financial restraints is very hard. So I think if we get that in a way on how, you know to, as Ashley said, she can supervise that for free. So that is, a big leap for some of us, because that's the only biggest barrier. How do we train? Because they will be like, how can I become a BCBA? Then, because if they become a BCBA, even if it's coming and getting a scholarship, they already been there. So when they go back home, they implement it culturally. They're gonna add things that they know will help, rather than you, Jawanda, or Melody. Now Ashley is there. Ashley is learning, and I think also she has added a few things on how she approaches. You see, so it makes it easier for them. If they come here and they go back, it's easier for them to implement. But for you, you have first to learn the culture before even you implement the program. By the time you really get to put everything together, it's taken a while. And as I had said, you can live in Kenya or Ghana or Sierra Leone forever. Sometimes you can never understand the whole culture. So I totally agree with Ashley.
Yeah. And the cost of a master's program at a local university here is so drastically different than the cost of an online master's program, like an ABA master's program that's available. So it's really just so out of reach for so many people here. And I know of a few folks who are actually enrolled in a speech and language pathology master's program here in Kenya, because there is no ABA program available, and their goal is to get this master's program and then enroll in an ABA verified course sequence. But they're not interested in becoming SLPs. They're interested in becoming BCBAs. And they see this as their only way to get there because of the financial barrier.
Right.
And I wish that wasn't the case.
Right. But that's not a bad way to go. I think some speech, having a degree outside of ABA, I think is wonderful. Because we need to, as ABA practitioners, we need to be well-rounded. Per se, we need to know more of the speech aspect, the developmental aspect, even the mental,
It is great to be competent in other areas, but if that's not your career goal or your passion, and you're doing that because it's your only option, I think that, and also in terms of time, not even just money, but they're now spending 2 years plus of their lives studying speech, even though that's isn't necessarily their passion.
Gotcha. Understand that. That's great to think about. Good.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to add to what Miriam said. Maybe you guys can add to that too. Health studies have long established that increasing the number of ethnically and racially diverse professionals is a critical component for serving their communities efficiently and closing the gap in healthcare disparity. Cultural natives can overcome communicative barriers with non-English speaking or illiterate consumers can also more accurately understand culture-related environmental contingencies and contexts, and that's helping in assessing and designing socially, culturally appropriate behavior programs. They can also help in building trust and maintain rapport with consumers by virtue of being members of a racial or ethnic group and therefore knowledgeable about the cultural nuances in social interaction. Can anybody add to that? Oh, we good. You're all muted.
I think Miriam covered it.
Good. Because when I remember when one time there were in Kenya, we have nursing schools, and normally they always go around. I wish I was talking to some nurses, and I hope that I'd continue pushing for that. They go for when they're having to visit maternity wards before they give birth. they should be given that knowledge of talking to parents about autism, because they're always there in the morning talking to parents about, giving birth. I think implementing such a, you know program where when they go talking to parents every morning, these nurses should also talk about autism, so that even as early as it is, they could detect this they could detect any problem with their child, if any, so that they just don't, be afraid of saying that, oh my goodness, having going back to the culture and thinking it's wrong. So I think that's one of the things I would like to see, and I hope I can work on that.
So,
So
I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. So, do you want them to speak specifically on autism, or maybe just development? Like,
So they normally just, these
yeah.
are nurses, they're students. Actually, they're students.
Uh-oh.
So they are being, they go, so they just talk about, for me, since it's autism, I just want them, they touch that part, even if they are talking about all whatever they learn and how to take care of their babies, what to do it, but just, to talk about autism, since it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't come out like it's a curse after a long, they will think it's a curse after that, because that's what they always think, and that's why they don't come out, because they have that mentality, oh my goodness, my kid has something is wrong. But you see,
Right.
with that little knowledge, they might, click in, link in, okay, that we were taught that before we are. Can it be that? You see,
I
giving
would
them.
I would be afraid to start putting fear in people to look out, look out, look out for this, and I would rather
Mhm.
train them just on the development. Um, you know how you go to the doctor and you get these developmental charts
Yeah.
and things like that. Because if we start teaching about autism, then I think we would have to start teaching about a whole bunch of different childhood disorders that can appear. And I
But
don't ever
it's not like teaching them just about autism, because
want
you don't go straight to you have to talk with the board on how to approach it.
okay,
Not me or my organization. It's about a board on how to, because they will talk about things like, polio, or, I mean, all these
okay,
kinds of things. It's just to touch base. In case you see
okay,
this, don't wait for that. In case you see this, it can be this. So it's just not just autism in general.
okay,
Even
okay,
if my main is focus is autism,
right.
just to that. Because actually, how many parents come to you uh, worried about their children?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean I'm constantly talking with parents on Facebook, or they're calling me or texting me on WhatsApp asking me
Mm-hmm.
just for advice on like interventions and things. And um, it's even just obtaining the autism diagnosis is difficult here because of how much it costs, and how
Mm-hmm.
few professionals there are who can actually provide that diagnosis ethically, because I
Right.
think there are also some folks who are fraudulently diagnosing as well. um, I know I have a group of friends in Ghana who were medical students. Now they're medical doctors, and I remember them distinctly telling me that they learned more about autism from me than they did in medical school, and that through their studies, that it just developmental disabilities and autism were not covered. And so then you have all of these brand new medical doctors working in Ghana who have very, very limited experience or knowledge surrounding autism and developmental disabilities. Yeah.
And I agree with you, actually. And as Jonda said, it's not really causing fear, but it's to not cause fear, because when they know it's not a bad thing, they come out. But when they go without that knowledge and they start thinking, oh my God, maybe my child has been, which they have that fear of coming out. If they
Right.
know
Yes.
it's not really a problem, or it's not something that's out of the ordinary, they're very okay with it, because they
Okay.
come out and be like, look, I heard about this autism, and I think my son. So like, we just take it like any other neurodevelopmental problem, and they'll be like, okay, so I think there is a way I can work with it. But when they go home without that knowledge, then they start seeing all these behaviors, and then they fear, oh my God, What about if it's this? I can't tell my family because they're gonna think, oh my, so they have that fear of coming out. But once they learn it's just something that is medical, then they are okay with it. So
That's
that's where
great.
I'm
The,
looking at it that way.
That's great.
the
Okay, I understand it in that perspective.
the parents are looking for answers, and if they go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't even
Right.
understand autism and doesn't have the ability to diagnose, doesn't know about autism, then how are they going to get their answers? They probably, it's really frustrating, I'm sure.
That's
Right.
true.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, and I really think, I mean, in this context, we're talking about autism, but really, if you think about it, it's building a culture of talking about things. That's just the way that our brains work. And if you've never heard of autism before, and the first time that you're ever hearing about it is, once you go maybe seek out answers as to some of the things that you might be seeing in your child or in your family members, that can be really devastating just because of the fact that you've never heard about it before. I mean, there's lots of reasons. Everyone experiences different things, but that reason alone can be a very impactful reason as to why something can be devastating. So not knowing is has a lot more power than we realize sometimes, which is, in my opinion, really how stigma develops, is because we don't talk about these things. So imagine if let's say just all doctors across the world, it was a normal thing just to talk about autism or talk about whatever, fill in the blank with whatever you want. It wouldn't, for a lot of people that would help tremendously, because you're aware. It's just becoming aware of it.
Thank you. Another good perspective, Melody.
So how can we I don't know, maybe we've covered how researchers can help. Do you have anything to add to that? Oh, we already covered it. Looks like
Well,
we really covered it.
one more
Mhm.
thing that we're working on here in Texas is that we're lobbying our government to cover these services. So become a Medicaid state that provides ABA services for children with autism. That's what we're doing here. That's another thing we're doing.
So in Kenya, ABA is not covered by most insurances. And last I heard, some of the medical doctors here were trying to conduct some type of needs analysis to really show that there is a need for ABA to be covered by insurance, and that would really help. But that's all research based as well.
Melody, you got anything to add to either? Okay, so what are behavior strategies that you guys can use in ASD, all therapy based? Let's talk about that. OT, speech. What strategies do you use? Ashley.
Well, I don't really want to talk about those other fields because I'm not trained and don't really know much about OT, SLP. In order to discuss and talk about that, I would leave that up to those professionals. But I guess just some basics about ABA. So when I explain ABA to parents, I'm always trying to. The first thing I say is that our ultimate goal is to increase behaviors of social significance. And so we do that through a variety of ways. We could talk all day about the different strategies, but essentially we're trying to increase skills such as functional communication, social skills, play skills, activities of daily living. And we have all different kinds of intervention strategies that we would use to do that. And then additionally, we work on reduction behavior. So any kind of challenging behaviors you may see your child exhibiting, whether it's aggression or self-injury, things like that, we also target behaviors for reduction. I mean, it was a very broad question, so I wasn't sure exactly how to answer it. I'll let
I wanted
Jay
like
and Melody take over too.
yes, Melody take over.
We just
What
want
did you
to
want?
Yes, I agree with that. And yeah, okay, so when it comes to strategy, that's very specific. So a strategy that I would use with one client or one family may not be the same strategy that I use with another family, even if the goal is the same. So if I'm trying to increase communication, how I might do that with one family depends on lots of different things. Who's around? What does the environment look like? Who's going to be interacting with this child on a regular basis? And that will look very, very different from home to home, which means we're not going to be using the same strategy in that sense. So I agree with what Ashley said in terms of intervention. I always like to frame it just as a like basic, broad way of describing strategy. I like to say, what would you like to see more of and what would you like to see less of? So thinking about if you're trying to, I'm going to use a basic example. If you're trying to teach a baby to walk, right? That's something you want to see a lot of. Walking is very important. We need to walk to do other things. So how are you helping the child do more walking? You might clap, you might tell them good job all the time, you might give him a treat every now and then eventually, he gets to a point where he or she is walking independently. What might you want to see less of? Whatever might be something that's particularly challenging or not useful. And when thinking about things that you want to see less of, I always like to say that in terms of the use that it has in that setting. So even if it's something that might not be something that you think is, I'm just trying to get to, I don't have a good example. My words are losing me a little bit here. But thinking of challenging behaviors in terms of things that are not useful to the child or are stopping him or her from being able to do things that are useful. So looking at it in that way can really help to pinpoint what things you might want to target for decreasing. And then talking with your BCBA about different strategies, and it's trial and error too. So it's not just like trying a strategy and saying, oh, well, this doesn't work, like, let's forget it. You might have to try a couple different things, add in new things, take out new things.
Right.
That was my really long-winded answer for that question.
So both Ashley and Melanie pretty much covered it. The points that I just want to make is that behavior strategies are very individualized, like they were saying, to the specific client or the learner in their environment. And we must make sure that whatever we're teaching, whether we're reducing problematic behaviors or increasing some type of skill acquisition, we have to make sure as BCAs that the things that we pull to teach, it actually adds value. It has to add value to not only our parents' lives, because our parents are really our real clients in this situation, but it adds value to who is supposed to be our real client, which is the child or the teen or the adult. And we need to get their buy-in. We need to get their feedback. That's the biggest thing with me. And I've learned that more and more working with adults. We need to know what's important to them, because a STEM, why do we need to fix that? If it's not harming anyone, if they can still focus and they can still learn, engaging in that STEM, why are we taking that away from them? If they want it, then let it be. So that's the biggest thing to me. Even with a child, we need to see as much as possible, how do we get their buy-in? And if it's really going to add value, whatever we're teaching, is it going to add value to their lives? And we need to stick to those things. Yes.
And I'm going to go back to you, Jawanda. Last time you were trying to explain something, and you're using. I'm still waiting for an answer. Joint something, and you're
Joint
trying.
attention.
Yes. Did you get the answer? I'm still waiting. Oh, and
I can't remember. I can't remember what the question was, but I just learned about Jasper. Does anybody know what Jasper is? It's oh my goodness, joint attention. Okay, I'm gonna look this up and we'll talk more about it. But it's I just learned about and I'm sorry to say that as a BCA, that I'm just learning about that ABA mixed with developmental research. It's called NBDI. Am I getting that right? NBDI. Oh, I should have had. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared, Ruth.
can anybody help there? Ashley, do you have an idea? Melody, do you know what? I'm
Okay.
Joint
I
attention.
don't know what it is. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
naturalistic developmental behavioral interventions. Oh, go ahead, Melody. You're gonna say something about joint attention.
Oh, I was just going to say that the easiest way for me to explain it is it's really just sharing an experience. So if you think about when you're watching a movie or something with your friends, you're not just each of you just watching the TV. You're looking at the TV, you're interacting with the person next to you, you're looking back at the TV, you're talking about things. So that's essentially the skill. That's a really advanced skill because we all do that as adults. But that's essentially what you're working towards when teaching joint attention. So for a child, it might look like just teaching the referencing. That's what Jawanda was talking about with the triangle.
Yeah.
It's referencing a toy, maybe looking back at the adult and looking back at the toy. So you're teaching that shift between where the attention is placed, and it's really just it's a social skill. It's a really important social skill because you need joint attention a lot of the times to develop higher levels of social skills.
Right, and I think that's the question she had. The question we had was, is it like necessary? Is it needed to gain that social, those social skills, that social communication? And that's what I was taught. Without that joint attention, you really cannot develop that social communication, you know?
So. Right. Yeah, it's one of the earliest forms of communication that we develop as humans, right. Usually between like 9 months and a year old. Kiddos are developing joint attention, and we need that. They need that skill in order to work on other ABA skills that we would target. So
yes,
and you can
for you,
Melody.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say other things that you might see, like for example, like I'm working with a child now who is just working on being next to siblings and peers and tolerating exchanging items. So I play with a toy, you play with a toy, and you might not even start there. It might just be two kids playing next to each other independently. So and it depends on the child, like where you might start, but that's even how basic like the start of social skills can begin, where you literally have just two children learning how to play next to each other independently, and then working on the interaction, and then working on the joint attention. And where you start for each child might be different too.
Definitely. But I think we would even start teaching joint attention before we get into even teaching social skills. At least we do. We start to teach it very, very early on. It's one of the first skills, along with manding and those other things that we teach no matter what, when we have a child actually diagnosed with autism. So.
All right, I think we are almost done here. Anything you guys want to add? Thank you so much. This has been, it's a talk. It's really a candid talk now, and I hope everybody's getting insight of these professionals' brains and where we are, and they're also trying to understand us. So it's like working together. So there are really points that that for me as a parent I'm getting. So I'm just quiet here, but I'm taking in a lot.
Ruth, I would love for you. I would love for you to do one of these with parents.
Yeah, next actually, I have professionals, like all of this is just professional, and then I have parents. Like my next session will be parents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a session I have that's mixed parents and professionals, and there's one that's parents that's on the 22nd.
Okay, I'll look
Yeah,
at that one.
I don't know if you watched the first one that had just parents, even if they were professionals.
That one.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah,
Okay.
I had from all over. It was like from each country. I put parents on the panel.
Can I go back and still watch that one?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
there. You find
Okay.
it. Actually, it's a pinned post.
I think Jay, your question earlier about like what can folks do in the U.S. and Canada to learn about other cultures and like help disseminate and things. I think that's something we could do. Watching, learning
Right.
from parents and
Right.
practitioners and professionals who are from these other countries.
Yeah.
And Ruth has a great platform where she brings so many different people from across Africa together to discuss strategies to help kids with autism.
Yeah,
So
if like you have like friends or where you can share the videos, then they get to understand
Right.
where we're coming from,
Right.
and they get ideas, and then they can always reach out to you guys, and you reach out to us and work with us, because it's like you are our medium. You get the information, you take it, you get it, you bring it back. And as Ashley said, yeah, it's all about putting it out there, because not so many of people will be like, oh my goodness, I didn't know it's like that, I didn't know it's like this. But you see, with you guys, you already have an idea. They don't. So when they watch these kind of clips and you share them, they come back to you and you come back to us. See, that's
continuing education.
Yes, it's a continued education. I'm gonna use Jawanda's where it's you guys, us, and them. So I think we're gonna wind this up. Sorry that our friends couldn't be with us, but it was a great discussion. And oh my God, I wish everything was so easy. It's so hard, but yeah, it's so hard trying to bring everybody to understand how difficult it is when they haven't experienced it. Once you are there, that's when now you see how vast the problem is of reaching out and teaching. But at least you guys are getting somewhere, and I hope that next year after COVID, you guys can come to Kenya on an event that may be my event, and we can talk to parents, all kinds of.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that you come there and now you'll sit with parents and also understand more and more. You get closer to them. You never
Right.
know.
Right.
So thank you guys for being here. I'll let you guys do your thing, and let's get in touch even after this. Don't leave.
Yeah.
I'll just end the broadcast. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you for
Thanks.
joining us.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.